For the recorded record, we will now call to order the December 12th, 2016 meeting of the East Hampton Conservation Commission. The meeting is being recorded now. Are there any public concerns, non-agenda items? Okay, none. We'll move forward to a request for determination of applicability. Joseph and Stan McCoy for the construction of an addition to a single-family residence and septic system replacement at 11 Clapp Street. Who would like to talk to us about this?
Come on up to the table.
We can bring another chair up if anyone likes.
Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I
one.
wanted to talk tonight.
You can just have a seat.
I'm Ron Warren, something like that. So, I guess
Joe.
The proposed addition is there's about 2 feet of one corner of the addition of Clipsville 100-foot buffer zone, which was established when they built the house. So
This is the plan, so this is a letter that you provided.
yeah. So,
The commission did a site visit Saturday morning,
okay.
so we commissioned minus Mr. Buttrick.
Okay.
I'm not afraid to hold.
So this is the buffer zone right
Yeah.
here, and this is the proposed addition,
Mhm.
and then you can see where it clips it right there.
Yep.
So,
And there'll be a
How
poured
much-
concrete foundation.
Yeah, how much area do you need to go into the buffer zone to do the foundation?
that should be very little. That particular area is not going to require most of the work is
10 feet or?
if that.
I really an architect, he estimated 200.
And you've got erosion control barriers. And then use silt fence. And when are you hoping to do the work?
You want to get started tomorrow, right?
Well, as soon as possible,
Right.
unless you can do it in the spring.
Any comments on the site visit? This is maintained lawn area.
I think I have those erosion controls, so I'm gonna have them in there.
And the only suggestion I would make would actually be to swap straw bottles for silt fence, given the scale of the work and the small footprint. And it's less disturbance to put them in.
So put the wattles in.
Yeah, just put,
sure.
just take those in and stick the silt fence, because it's not a huge
Mhm.
ground disturbance, and you've got to maintain lawn area, don't go across, so it'll be
Yeah.
hopefully easier
Okay.
in the same orientation.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anyone care to make a motion?
I will make a motion to issue a negative determination of applicability. Three. That the work described in the request is within the buffer zone as defined in the regulations, but will not alter an area subject to protection under the Act, and therefore said work does not require the filing of a notice of intent subject to the following conditions. And I think the conditions would just be 48-hour notice before construction and the erosion controls as discussed.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. One moment, your paperwork will be ready. passing this around for support. You have a phone today. That's really nice of you. We're gonna hand deliver this tonight. Mark, do you want a paper copy for DEP, or if we scan it and email it to you tomorrow, is that preferred?
Scan and email is
Scan. So we just need one copy. I can make sure I checked off everything.
Do you want the map and lot number included in there?
Yes, it's map 113, lot 17, I believe.
That's correct.
Because I just typed it into the form an hour ago.
Map 113, lot 17.
That's correct. Better.
She imported that special from Japan,
That might- Would you like a staple there? Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys.
Put a file folder together for this one. Who wants to do this? Put in a file folder for this. All right. Moving on to the notice of intent filed by Cumberland Farms for the construction of Cumberland Farms facility at 221 Northampton Street, map 114, lot 34, in the 100-foot buffer zone of DPW. This is a continuation of the public hearing. Good evening.
Good evening.
Could you reintroduce yourself for the record?
We're Luke DeStefano with Polar Engineering, Southborough, Mass. And I think at the conclusion of our last meeting, there were a few outstanding comments made as it related to a comment letter that was received just before the last meeting from DEP. And there was also a desire of the board and the commission to have a site walk, which I believe you held the following Saturday. I'm unaware of any additional comments having come out of that site walk. However, we have gone through, we've reviewed the various comments issued by DEP as well as the subsequent letter received from Doucette Associates. We've addressed all the comments. We've resubmitted both revised plans, a revised drainage report, and a comment response letter, which I hope the commission has received and had a chance to review. If not, I'm more than happy to go through the various comments. And
I think we do need you to step through the comments because there's a lot going on this site.
okay, does everybody have a copy of the DEP letter or the information that was resubmitted?
Yeah, where's the file of things?
I was having trouble with Dropbox, so it was not cooperating with me. It's only fair to point out that we have a DEP representative here. In general, Mark shows up every night. Do you know Mark?
We've met multiple times.
Right. Mark's on vacation, we need to make sure we're doing things the right way.
Perfect.
Yeah, actually, so where are the revised things?
They're in my office, and I don't have my office key with me, so I can either run home and get my office key, give me 10 minutes, or you can start having the dialogue and discussion. You did receive electronic copies the day they were sent. So,
Why don't we start talking?
or
Or
do
can I
you
make,
want me to go?
sure. Sorry, Jess.
Is it
It's
easier
fine.
just to make copies of the letter? Is there a copy machine?
There is.
Yes, I have a copy machine, that would probably be faster.
That's
Thank
the
you.
DEP letter and our,
Is there a DSAT letter?
that's,
Why don't we do both those?
Okay.
And we apologize for the technical difficulties.
no worries, I'll wait. Those are my notes.
Didn't memorize it.
I did not.
More power to you if you can. Did you just scatter the fun and the rest of the table? Yes. That was what you requested, wasn't it? I believe it is, yeah.
Oh, I guess while we're at it, were there any comments? We did follow up and ask if there was anything that came from the sidewalk. I don't remember having heard anything from the commission or,
There was concerns about the drainage off the property onto
Whatever becomes behind it.
Right.
To say, to be fair, the extent of my familiarity with the site is, I was not at the site visit, so it's just general familiarity, driving by it recently, paying more attention. I know that there was a question about the berm relative to site grading.
Correct.
There's that existing earthen berm,
right?
kind of parallels the wetland to the north, sort of the east side of the property there. I guess Route 10 isn't as north-south there as I thought it was.
Yeah, it's a little,
So between the property and East Hampton Savings Bank on the corner. And then, I guess I had a question. There appears to be a lot of, or spots of, Japanese bamboo throughout some of the flat parts of the site, or in that general area. Do you know, false bamboo, Lepidum cuspidatum? It's a non-native invasive species.
and
And
the concern is.
my concern is that the site work will actually exacerbate its spread in the area. Thank you. Jeez, I'm taking down, pass it around. Thank you. In general, so it spreads by root fragment, rhizome, and it's a non-native invasive for a reason.
Is there a
So
method
we're-
you prefer? Is it something that
Um,
you would like to see Cumberland Farms potentially do
To
as part of their
include-
construction?
To include an invasive species management component to long-term O&M for the site,
Okay.
especially with regard to the stormwater basin.
More than happy to have that as a condition. If the commission sees fit to issue that. And to answer your question about the berm, it is being, for the most part, graded away as part of the proposed development. And I think I mentioned last time, we are taking steps as required to contain all stormwater for the most part on the property and then ultimately discharge it at a much lesser rate back to what is ultimately the east or the rear side of the site. I know there has been some concern about runoff from the property affecting the properties behind, but as mentioned, the piece that Cumberland Farms is looking at does not stretch the entire depth of that property. It does not run from front all the way to the back. There's about 150-foot wide swath of land that will ultimately remain untouched. Cumberland Farms is purchasing only about 2 acres of the roughly 6.3 acre piece of land that's there. So runoff from the property will ultimately exit the Cumberland Farms site and then drain onto the remaining piece of land that's being left undeveloped. So
Presently or in perpetuity because it has no development potential under the current
I
restrictions?
can't talk, I wouldn't talk to what the landowner may or may not be able to do in the future. And that would be something that would have to be taken up should something ultimately be proposed in the future.
You're saying there's just make sure I'm interpreting this correctly, you said correctly, there's a 50-foot, it's 50 feet from the rear of the Cumberland Farms portion to the rear property line?
Correct. Right now, the property is about 6.3 or 257,000 square feet. Cumberland Farms is looking to take about 84,000 square feet of that, or just shy of 2 acres. So this, what you're seeing here, represents only a portion of the total depth of the property. I think Cumberland Farms is looking to take about 300 feet of depth away from Northampton Street. Then existing today, there's roughly another 120 to 150 feet of property before you hit the next abutting piece of property. So that swath will remain unchanged.
So I think I noted on the revised drawing, that there's a drainage easement now shown on that adjacent property on the back.
Correct.
Yeah, and that, so that's a requirement of the stormwater management ordinance that there be that easement, so that is good.
Who's gonna hold the easement? Who's the easement to?
But ultimately, I guess we grant to Cumberland Farms from the current property owner.
So they would maintain that?
Correct. Ultimately, it would be something that the landowner and Cumberland Farms would have to negotiate, but I would think it would ultimately be Cumberland Farms' responsibility.
So, so this is the response, we could start with a response to these comments.
Sure, so the first comment basically related to the soils that were on site. We noted based on on-site soil testing as well as the borings, that the soils out there are generally consistent with what we had originally identified, and that they are soil group B and C's within the development footprint. The second question or comment basically related to some of the TSS removal rates that we had initially included within our drainage report. We've since gone back and basically modeled this basin as a detention basin only, even though it will provide infiltration. We've also modified the TSS removal calculations. I think there was also a concern relative to the storm scepter and what we had utilized for a TSS removal rate on that. That's been modified ultimately at the end of the day. Even with the proposed modifications and the recalculations, we're still showing an 81% TSS removal rate for the stormwater management system.
Can you, sorry to interrupt you, but could you talk a little more about the change in the basin from infiltration to detention? And why was it infiltration before and why is it detention now? What
It's still gonna
changed?
act as an infiltration basin. It's still exactly the same as it was. We made it a little bit smaller, but in our calculations, to be conservative, we modeled it as a detention basin. So there was some initial concern about runoff rates and things of that nature, and we wanted to show that even as modeled as a detention versus infiltration or retention basin, that the system will still function and meet all the requirements of the stormwater management guidelines. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it still will provide the recharge volume that was ultimately required. I think is about 1,068 cubic feet, which we are showing below our initial outlet. It will still infiltrate. We've added a drawdown device, which was a concern, so that their likelihood of having standing water in this basin is very low. And then there was ultimately some concern with separation to groundwater. And what we ultimately determined is even with the basin now, you're gonna have about a 3-foot separation from groundwater from the bottom of the basin.
How many of your test pits were in the basin area?
3.
3. All right. Can we?
third comment ultimately dealt with land use with higher pollutant load. So if you've had a chance to review what we have, as we indicated, added a stormwater quality unit. We've also added an emergency shut-off control valve, basically located in the drainage structure. There's a manhole here. So any runoff from this portion of the property is going to ultimately be collected via deep sump catch basins, oil water hoods, conveyed via underground piping to a manhole here prior to being directed to the basin. And in that manhole here, we're proposing an emergency shut-off valve. So in the event of a release of product within the fueling area, the operators of this facility are instructed to go out. They simply pop the manhole cover, and it's a guillotine type shut-off valve. We've been asked to use it in sensitive areas before. We've probably implemented a similar valve in at least half a dozen sites that I'm aware of. But it's just an added measure of providing protection to stormwater prior to it being introduced to groundwater or ultimately its contributing area.
So you're saying the staff at the facility is responsible for activating?
Correct.
Manually operating that?
Mhm.
And they receive training on this?
The only training is you have to pop the manhole cover and push.
And what triggers their response, like how do they know?
I mean, it would be based on a release of products. They're gonna know if there's a significant release. That doesn't mean your day-to-day operations, but the likelihood of having a significant release at these facilities nowadays is very, very low. So in the event that there is something that triggers it, a little bit is common sense, but they know that if there is a release, that they get to go out and operate this device. And it's, you know, it's an added measure of protection in addition to the deep sump catch basins and the storm scepter, stormwater quality unit, all of which in and of themselves is gonna provide some sort of protection as well.
One question I had is that at the corner of the lot on the side, you know, I guess on the southeast side of the building, yeah, southeast corner of that lot, there's a catch basin, and the grades coming across the surface are pretty steep, and then I guess a 6-inch curve around the parking lot. And I guess I was wondering if you're comfortable that that grade will have enough capacity to, you know, get all the runoff into the storm drainage system during a pretty quick event, you know, considering that there's not a lot of storage on the ground surface before water would start going over the curb and onto the adjacent parcel essentially.
I mean, in general, for the most part, these catch basins are designed to handle about a 25-year storm event, so any catch basin, you know, should you get a higher event, quick yield storm, you're gonna have basically some topping of those basins. We've designed it so that we're obviously collecting the first flush, so you're gonna have runoff that hits the paved surfaces, it's ultimately collected, so that's what's ultimately collecting any, you know, sand, grit on the site, any hydrocarbons that may be on the property, dripping off of vehicles, things of that nature. So that will be directed into the catch basins. Could we add a double catch basin there? Sure. In a heavy event storm like that, you're probably still gonna get runoff topping off, and ultimately overtopping the curb and getting into the basin that way. But I think that's gonna be extremely rare.
I mean, I wouldn't have a problem with it going to the basin, but I think the grades at that spot would seem to.
It would ultimately continue as it does today.
From the catch.
Some of it would ultimately get into the basin, but you're right, there is a small area,
Yeah.
basically in here that has the ability to sheet flow as it does today.
Through the chair,
Yes.
just a point of information. One of the things we found is, ever since January 2008, when the stormwater standards came into effect, Stormwater Standard 9 required the logbook to be kept on site. How do you see that happening here?
Just a standard logbook.
The stormwater maintenance logbook?
That's the responsibility of Cumberland Farms.
Okay.
They handle that fairly routinely at the majority of their facilities where they have a stormwater maintenance log. My company does not do that for Cumberland Farms. We do provide those services to some of our other clients where we're doing semi-annual or quarterly inspections. I don't know who handles that for Cumberland Farms, but that's been a condition we've seen put on any number of decisions, and ultimately it's Cumberland Farms' responsibility.
I know that, but I'm just wondering, if you interface with Cumberland Farms to make sure it gets done, the answer sounds like the answer is no. I mean, that's the problem we're running across. Even though it's all in black and white, it has to be done, it's still not getting done. So I'm just trying to encourage commissions and applicants to come up with a way to help make sure it gets done. And I don't know the answer.
I mean, from experience, I've seen conditions placed on decisions that require the applicant or the operator of these systems to provide the logs, typically on a twice-a-year basis. Again, unfortunately, once we get the site permitted and approved, our involvement in the operation, long-term operation and maintenance goes away.
Stormwater standard, I mean, general condition 19 says all this, but whether or not Cumberland Farms or any owner of any stormwater system, whether or not they even read it, is up for debate, of course. Do you have a stormwater ordinance?
We do.
Is there any requirement by the city to monitor these things?
For the city to monitor,
Under the ordinance?
we, occasionally, depending on some of the developments, we would require, stormwater reports to be submitted to the city to be kept on file. as
Well,
part of
what
the decision.
about this?
I mean, we could, there's nothing that, but I think that, it would just go to the city engineer, he'd take a look at it, and he would put it in a file, if that's.
I mean, there's no requirement under, I know I'm getting off base a little, Melissa, but
No, I
there's no
understand the concern.
There's no requirement for submitting the report to the commission. The only requirement is the logbook be kept on site available for review.
I mean, just thinking about it in terms of improving the documentation, and this is no reflection on the site engineer, it's the site owner who's responsible for following up, would be to require that they submit it to some entity in the city who had a vested permitting interest, which would be the Conservation Commission or the Planning Board. That's all well and good to put that, another line on paper about that, but actually following up on that level of documentation is more onerous than.
We rely on the
Or even-
applicant to remember.
Basically, and they're good intentions.
Often.
And we could write it in, but it.
Yeah, I mean, the filing of an application for a permit under the ordinance gives the city right of entry for inspection in the future, but doesn't require, probably doesn't require follow-up activities.
I would love it if we had the administrative capability to follow up on every aspect of it.
I mean, this has been in the regulations for 8 years. Almost 9 years now.
Moving on.
Thank you.
It's a valid point, and actually, speaking to, you've got a stormwater O&M plan that references the manufacturer's recommendation for maintenance of the stormwater quality unit. Can you help me find the part where it says how frequently it needs to be?
That should be included in the rear of the report. We actually include the.
There's the storm scepter technical sheet?
Correct. And in there, we'll have the maintenance requirements I think it's more towards the back.
Okay, so
But
we
they
compare
actually
there.
talk about all of the, right, how often throughout the course of the year it should be inspected, when it should be maintained, what the sediment levels are, et cetera.
So this requires inspection every 6 months for the first year of operation to determine the oil and sediment accumulation rate. In subsequent years, inspections can be based on first-year observations or local requirements. So we could include a local requirement to inspect it more frequently than discretionary decisions made by the owner.
What is it saying for the first year? Every annual?
Based on the first-year observations.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, enforcement under the ordinance does, you know, we do have non-criminal disposition, the ability to levy fines, so, you know, if we went on site and found that something wasn't being maintained properly, theoretically.
Well, if they don't
we could.
maintain the logbook, that's an ongoing condition in perpetuity.
Mhm.
You always have the enforcement ability under the Wetlands Protection Act. But it would be handier if the ordinance also had that.
Yeah, well, we'll have to be looking at this under the new phase 2 requirements, I'm guessing, some point in the near future.
So bottom line is, you don't interface with Cumberland Farms maintenance people on stormwater management?
Correct.
Okay.
Do you know, from your experience with them, if they have in-house facility staff that goes to the various locations, or is it location by, is it contracted out location by
I don't
location?
know.
Could you find out,
I'm sure I could. Sure.
please?
Sure.
Thank you. Could you summarize the point at which, or the storm event that would result in an overflow from the stormwater basin?
I'd have to go back and look
Or
at.
do you want to just go through this one and the next one with
I don't know if we specifically identified what storm event. I know we have bottom of the basin at 179, we have our first outlet at 180. And
So, a foot of
we have-
water,
we're basically, we have the ability before our first outlet to contain, it's somewhere in the vicinity of 1,068 or 1,080 cubic feet of stormwater within the basin before we hit our first.
do you recall what kind of storm event that is?
My guess is it's probably gonna be somewhere between the 25 and 50. But if you, again, had a chance to look at the report, you'll see that regardless of the storm event and what we have for outlet from the basin, we're reducing the runoff rates to the back of the property fairly significantly over the existing condition. And again, that doesn't account for any sort of infiltration that you're getting within the basin. And then the volume itself also does not account for any additional storage you're getting within the system up into that point. So you're getting additional volume within the catch basins, within the stormwater quality unit, within the manholes, within the pipe. So there's a significant amount of volume prior to discharge. And I think overall, the benefits of the system versus what you have today, which is effectively a site that pretty much runs untreated and unchecked into the wetland and into the abutting properties, I think this is a significant improvement over what's there. Granted, I understand it's not a developed site.
I was gonna say, there's a whole lot
But-
more impervious area in this scenario.
I understood.
So, So a stormwater basin, I understand you're not citing as an infiltration basin any longer, but this may still at times of the year have those properties. But it wouldn't have those properties if the ground is, how does that work when the bottom of the basin's frozen?
Typically, it operates like
The
it
ground
would.
is frozen.
You do still get some sort of detail or some sort of infiltration, but these are designed, and it is New England, you do have that condition, and Mark, I'm sure that's something that's come up before when you have a frozen ground condition. But you still have volume contained before your first orifice, and then you also, in this particular instance, we have the drawdown device, so you're gonna have an added benefit. But similar to a situation where you might have gotten back-to-back storm events where you had a basin that hasn't had the ability to draw down, you're gonna have instances where you might have a basin that doesn't operate at 100% efficiency just because of either a frozen ground condition or a back-to-back storm condition. Here, I think we've taken all the appropriate measures with the drawdown device, with providing additional measures, additional storage, so that when you do have those instances, you're still gonna be getting the proper treatment prior to any runoff ultimately making its way. And what's also important to note is even if the site was undeveloped, you'd still have those frozen ground conditions where stormwater isn't gonna infiltrate back into the existing condition any different. So effectively, you're seeing the same thing.
You'd have to make a basin significantly larger.
Right.
If you wanted to take, frozen conditions into.
No, I just wanted to understand for my own benefit how that,
And we run some of those calculations in the past, and it's a big,
It's
you
huge.
have to expand it quite a bit over its existing size.
can you just summarize the stormwater, the O&M of the actual basin itself?
Again, traditionally, it's inspected. I think we call for semi-annual inspections. And depending on what you have, based on that inspection, that would basically indicate and dictate what type of maintenance. It could be just something as simple as litter removal from the basin. It could be cleaning of the outlet control structures. It could be maintenance of the drawdown device. Again, it depends a little bit on what you find. Sometimes, more often than not, these things traditionally don't require maintenance after the inspections because the rest of the treatment train, they traditionally function a little better if they're maintained and operated the right way, to where by the time stormwater's getting to the basin, it's pretty much pre-treated and clean. And then obviously you'll have just your run-of-the-mill maintenance, making sure it's mowed and upkept in terms of just the vegetation in the basin.
And what are you planting, what is the seed mix for vegetation in the basin?
I'd have to go back. Basically, it's just, we have a detention basin mix, or a infiltration basin mix. It's in our details that we provided. It's also identified in the drainage report.
Just curious.
Landscape.
The landscape plan is
Landscape
sheet
plan?
8.
Just looking at-
It's in, you're probably not gonna be able to read it.
Is this where you're proposing wet mix?
Correct, and then there's also some identification there, and then within the details of the basin itself.
I don't think the wet mix is actually shown as being used anywhere on the plans, that was a question I had. In the drawing.
So, should I look at grading and drainage for the basin details?
The details are within sheets 9. And again, I don't know if it's 9-1, 9-2,
Mhm.
9-3. It is there, again, if there's a specific mix the town would like to see used, let me know, we'll add it.
Mark, have you ever seen wet mix used for for a stormwater basin?
I typically don't
It's-
pay attention, so I can't answer that.
That's not it. Oh, good gracious. All right. So I guess I'm just curious as to why wet mix as opposed to like erosion control mix for moist sites and detention basins. It's supposed to
Again,
only,
if there's a specific requirement or a specific mix you want to see used, let me know. We'll make certain Cumberland Farms adds it.
request a magnifying glass?
Our landscape architect will spec out the basin mix based on what they find for borings. So for sites, it's traditionally the same, but I don't wanna say for absolute certain.
Maybe Jay can zoom it up on
Yeah,
his.
Can you find the basin details?
Well, I don't
It's right
Basin,
there,
the wet mix.
that's it right there.
So-
There.
It's the berm. See drainage, see landscape plan for bottom of basin. But which basin plan? Yeah, no, that I'm very familiar with. I'm trying to figure out what the, so there's no soil being brought into the basin to create this drawing matrix? I'm trying to
I'm not-
understand the construction of the basin relative to vegetation and having that vegetation get established and, so you call it for 6-inch loam and basin seed mix, see landscape plans, okay.
Again, I guess I'm not certain what exactly you're asking or what your concern is. It's a little unclear.
So one concern I have based on general observation of not just basins in East Hampton, but basins everywhere, is that they become either Phragmites stands or cattail stands. And what, if any, potential impairment that may have on function compared to design intent? The
You're
goal
asking me
isn't-
to speculate about basins that we have no control over?
But you have
They-
control over this basin.
I don't, Cumberland Farms does, but ultimately, if these things are maintained the way they're supposed to be maintained, they should continue to function as designed, and they should be maintained in accordance with the landscape plan provided. So in instances where you've seen that, I can't say if that was a design intent or if it's a lack of maintenance. My guess is probably the latter. But again, I think you're comparing apples to oranges here. I know Cumberland Farms from experience. They're very good at maintaining their properties, both landscaping and the hardscape surfaces. I think if you've had an opportunity to see any of the recently constructed Cumberland Farms, they do a good job with that. But again, 5 years from now, can I tell you with absolute certainty that Cumberland Farms is gonna maintain that basin?
Right, that I understand it's not your responsibility. A perfect example of a recently constructed one up just south of here has tons of Japanese knotweed growing in their stormwater
One of
features.
what?
A Cumberland Farms,
Do you know which one?
the one in Westfield at the intersection of 10 and 202.
Unfortunately, we didn't do that one. You say one
Of course
the other
not.
ones. I was trying to think of some of the ones around here that we did, but none of them have bases. I do know the site you're talking about.
So, that is one of the reasons it's, stormwater in this particular corridor especially is particularly
Understood.
sensitive in East Hampton, so. Does anyone else have any comments they wanna add from the site visit? Anything else since we've been, if anything else has come up, or do we wanna move on to the next letter? And things that may apply to the stormwater peer review.
Yeah, let's just go through the letter first.
Okay. So we can skip water usage and traffic impact, please.
I'm assuming with the Doucette letter, you wanted just to run through the stormwater management
That
section?
would be ideal, yes, please.
Okay, so they had first talked about, they had a comment relative to the spillway elevation. And we had set it originally at elevation 181, and that there was some discrepancies between that and what was identified in the drainage report. We've modified both so that the spillway elevation is consistently set at 182. So I think that addresses that. Comment number 2, again, the specific comment deals with infiltration basins, overfill materials, and proper separation from groundwater. Basically, our response was that we revised the basin to exclude infiltration. However, since the system still contains the 1 foot of recharge storage volume below the lowest outlet, which I've identified, the bottom elevation has been reset at 179, which is 3 feet above the seasonal high groundwater elevation. Third comment again deals with a minimum of 2 feet of separation from seasonal high groundwater for infiltration basins, but again, we've not designed this, it's no longer considered an infiltration basin. Comment number 4 talks about directing the emergency spillway towards an adjacent property. I think we've touched on that it's really directed towards the property that it's being developed from. We've also added the drainage easement as requested. The 5th comment dealt with a monitoring well being requested within the basin bottom, which we've added and show in the new details. Comment 6 talked about infiltration basins and the requirement that anything at the top of the basin be unimpeded vehicular access around the entire basin perimeter. We show an 8 foot wide access lane to provide access for maintenance. There was some discussion about the need for a 15 foot wide access lane, but for a basin of this size, you're not gonna see any heavy machinery out there. It's more or less a lawnmower and, you know, potentially a bobcat or something similar to that. So 8 feet wide, we feel is more than adequate to provide access.
Question, does that criteria change for detention basins as opposed to infiltration basins, or is it just basins in general?
I think
The recommendation?
I think their comment was relative to infiltration basin. I think we still need to provide maintenance.
Right. No, 15 feet seems, Mark, is that something you're familiar with?
Say that again now?
It says, the comment is Mass DEP Volume 2, Chapter 2, design criteria for infiltration basins requires that the top of the basin must provide unimpeded vehicular access around the entire basin perimeter, and that the access area shall be no less than 15 feet.
That's wide, pretty wide, yeah.
And that's, I mean, it seems to be a quote from,
I'm not
a citation
familiar
from
with that
the-
specific citation.
okay, I think we're all on the same page that seems very wide.
Yeah.
So, I have no issues in that regard. I wondered if that was a criteria you were familiar with.
No.
Okay.
Comment 7 dealt with the request for a drawdown device, which we've added. The comment 8 dealt with one of the cross-section details that we have provided, and an impervious core detail. And the impervious core detail is for the fill embankment only, not required on the quote uphill side of the basin. We've added some notes to the details relative to the installation of that impervious core to prevent erosion and sedimentation. And we've added an additional row of soil erosion control measures to help prevent that as well. Comment 9 talks about the SWIP, and a final copy of the SWIP will be submitted to the Planning Board or Conservation Commission at least 2 weeks prior to the start of construction. Comment 10 dealt with a mounting analysis, which is not required for the project. The basin only utilizes detention to attenuate the 2, 10, 25, and 100-year storm events. And then the site plan calls for a 4 foot high chain link fence. DUSET recommended a 6 foot high fence. I think in this particular instance, or we feel in this particular instance, 6 foot high fence is probably unnecessary, with the maximum water depth being a foot at any given time. But I'm not gonna squabble over 2 feet if that's something the board or the commission feels very strongly about. 6 foot fence it is.
It's not really an interest in
That's be under planning board.
Yeah, I was gonna
decision.
say,
That'll be
that's really not
planning
one of the
board
interests of the act, I agree, I would defer to planning.
It's more of like a safety issue in terms of people accessing the site, so that's gonna be under planning board
So
jurisdiction.
don't expect a comment from us. Okay. Mounding? accounting analysis? Sorry.
Again, we
Did
don't.
you just say that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we don't.
Oh, yeah, you did. Sorry, I was reading it while you were moving on to the fourth. Okay. And then the rest is?
I mean, this, the Doucette letter was directed to, or was part of the planning board process. We resubmitted it because there were some issues with stormwater. And we just wanted the commission to have the full story, for lack of a better term.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What is the most current revision date of plans for the project?
Whatever that one is there, I believe.
So November 22nd? Is
That's the one.
match? Okay.
Those are the ones that
Oh, there
that's
might
the
have
date that I've seen.
You might have seen a new set that came out. We got traffic comments back between the time we submitted to the Concom or resubmitted to Concom and what we resubmitted for the planning board hearing next week.
So what?
However, the plans didn't change. They were basically just comments that we added
Okay.
that were based on the additional traffic counts that were taken. Unfortunately, our traffic engineer couldn't take counts during Thanksgiving holiday week, so they had to postpone things. So it was nothing that affected the site plans that you would see. So that set right there hasn't been changed.
But the set that I received today for the planning board is different from what was received just for Conservation Commission for the
It
plans? or
might
the
have a
same?
different date, that's it.
They have the same revision date, that's why I'm asking.
Okay, then we didn't change it.
Okay.
Sometimes we will, just because when we resubmit, we
Okay.
change. But what we probably did is, because it was all traffic related, we just submitted the Doucette response memo along with another set of plans to the board,
Okay.
planning board.
Okay.
So that would be the latest set right there.
Alright. Are there any other questions for discussion?
Yeah, so I have a question about, I guess this is for Jessica. So the stormwater management ordinance requires the posting of a bond for completion of the stormwater system. I guess, I'm assuming the planning board.
The engineer, we'll request a number from him in terms of what he thinks the value of that bond would be, but it would be part of the decision under the planning board.
Okay, so we can, on the stormwater ordinance.
Well, this is, I
basically
mean.
reference the planning board.
I think for the last, I'm trying to think, Paul Street, I think, you had a bond, there was a bond as part of that.
Correct.
That was the covenant of lots, it wasn't an actual letter of credit or anything like that, he was doing lots, but it was combined, it was for stormwater and it was for some items under the planning board decision as well.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that's the last time we've had kind of a project where there was a bond where both boards had money in it.
Right, and I would think that that would make sense in this case also. You know, I'm not used to dealing with bonds really, so if that was,
If I could recommend though, to make sure that it doesn't get lost in the shuffle between the two boards, is that whatever decision or whatever correspondence that you wanna send to the planning board on behalf of this project, whether it's in an email form because you haven't finalized the permits yet, or whether it's a copy of the permit itself with a bond number in there, but I think that it will hold more water, no pun intended, to, if it's coming directly from Conservation Commission to the planning board requesting that as part of their decision process as well. That's why we have the interboard review of plans, that's why it's part of our process, so.
okay. So if we were, I guess, so we don't have a number now for what the value of construction for the stormwater management system would be for that.
I mean, you could ask him for a preliminary number, but we would wanna make sure that the city engineer is the final.
Right. So do you have an idea for what the, cost of stormwater improvements would be?
No, I mean, I could give you a ballpark guess, but I don't wanna be way off in one direction or another. So I'm gonna guess it's gonna be somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. But again, that could change between now and when they ultimately go to construct this thing.
So who has the final say on that?
I mean, I guess, let's see, I don't know if we could close the stormwater. I don't know if we could issue the stormwater permit without the question of the bond being settled.
Well, and I would just advise that, you know, the planning board has heard initial, presentation from the applicant, but there hasn't been a lot of board discussion, as of yet. So if for whatever reason, the plans change for some odd reason, and the stormwater permit's closed out, you know what I mean, that would have to restart that process again. I don't know if that's gonna happen, but I just don't wanna shut the door on one permit while there could be changes that happen under review.
Understood, and at some point, if the applicant is willing to take on that risk, then that is
That's true.
that's their right to do that. I guess one thing I would like the opportunity as a board to do is to review draft conditions.
From the planning board, you mean, or from your own?
From our own.
Okay.
In a public forum for discussion purposes, which I don't have ready at this moment. But I guess I think it's important to work out the stormwater details. But I'd also like to know if there are any other questions, comments, concerns from a Wetlands Protection Act perspective from the commission before opening it up to the public.
Just a concern about the removal of the berm. You said you're gonna remove it, but you'll leave some portion of it there, or?
Well, I mean, we're ultimately grading this site so that all the stormwater from our site, for the most part, is contained within our site.
Okay.
So, you know, I don't think the ultimate elimination of that berm has any negative impact, which I'm guessing is your concern to the wetland area.
Yeah, it's right on the edge of the wetlands area. It looks like it's made out of gravel, which looks like it's not gonna grow anything very well, so.
Yeah, we're effectively, you know, all of the paved portions are gonna be completely curved in, so we're, you know, containing that runoff there, and then it's just this area here, but I think that berm basically starts somewhere here and runs back. So most of it is being graded away, but there are some areas that you're able to see here, that's our limit of work. So that berm that sits in here, a lot of this area here, we're not touching. We have to match those grades, that limit of work on it.
The only other weird thing was there was a pipe in the site, is it not on the site, so the Cumberland Farms is gonna purchase, but coming out of the side of the hill behind it, that didn't look like it was coming from anywhere other than the site, so.
Did you take a picture?
Yeah, but it's like a little 6-inch.
Of course you did.
You
You
know.
had to ask.
A little 6-inch.
PVC?
Public foundation right from the old.
And where roughly is
It was
that on the
pitching
site?
down, it was off the site.
Oh,
It's in the drainage area where the,
basins?
drainage easement is. It's on one of those hills. In the back towards the industrial drive.
So the-
Could you tell me,
Sheet,
do you know what sheet the
5.
drainage easement is shown on?
Sheet 5.
Shown on sheet 5.
G-
It could be on.
CFG05?
Yes.
Correct.
But somewhere back there.
Is there something that's not showing up on this PDF? Or when this was, so it's kind of pointing to space.
Well, it's ultimately because it hasn't been defined yet.
At what point will that be defined?
The stormwater ordinance just requires that easements be recorded at the registry of deeds before a certificate of compliance can be issued.
I mean, I'll say from the
And what's the-
planning board's perspective, they're gonna want more details on the drainage easement. I think right now, how it's presented, it's a little bit too gray. And understanding that the property next to it, you know, it L shapes around it, and that's not developed as of now, but it will be developed in the future, and they're gonna wanna make sure that there's not gonna be any issues down the road between this site and their drainage and what's gonna be happening next door whenever that happens. And so, you know, I think before you come to the planning board on the 20th, some of those details are gonna have to be presented, I think, on that drainage easement and how it's intended to work, and a little bit more of just the legal side of it. They're gonna have some concerns.
Any other questions from the board? I'll open it up to comments from the public. Okay, maybe there are.
I had a concern about the erosion controls. At least on the last plans that I saw, they were indicated just as straw wattles, and in contrast to the previous site we were discussing, I think that perhaps they should be beefed up to a silt fence, given the steepness of the slope into the wetland area, at least on that north and east, sort of north and eastern boundaries.
That's,
I think they're indicated maybe as a double straw wall.
It overlaps. No, it just
yeah,
overlaps.
traditionally it would be silt fence in the.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Traditionally, we would have silt fence along the north, and I thought that's what the plan had called for.
I didn't.
Silt fence and then straw wattles in areas where we got, paved area and you can't really attend to.
So there's a double row of staked straw wattles at the outlet structure in the bottom of the basin, it looks like. And then it just, around the perimeter, it looks like a staked straw wattle. And then provide additional row of staked straw wattles for basin construction, but I think I agree that straw wattle and silt fence, given the scale of disturbance. And is there a specific reference to a diameter for the wattle?
There should be a detail in there.
There's a detail, I don't see a diameter. I see how deep the stake is supposed to go.
We'll add it.
Okay. If you could tell us what that is, that'd be helpful. Or an updated detail, or some reference. Or maybe it's in writing that I need to. No, that's okay. You wrote a comment you wanted to
Yeah, so I guess one thing that and I'm not sure if it's that I wasn't thinking about it or focusing on it or listening to it during the last hearing, is that this application also covers the installation of a sewer line to the kind of the east side of the parcel, extending down towards connection somewhere, correct? Whatever. So I just want to make sure that that is something we're aware of.
Is that in the, it's partially in the buffer zone?
Yeah, it's some of it is.
So. There's a sewer connection. So I guess, in your plan set, this line type, this dash line type is, that's called out as erosion control barrier here, it looks like that's on either side of a trench.
Correct.
How are they gonna do that with the construction equipment? It just seems very constrained, and
I mean, they're installing just a simple, I believe it's a 6-inch sewer line. That's, I mean, they'll dig a trench, they'll have the erosion control on either side of it, it'll be a little wider than the trench.
so they're gonna be perpendicular to the trench digging it, or they're gonna wanna be?
They'll probably, and again, I'm not the contractor, I don't know what his means and methods will be, but at the end of the day, they're gonna be able to stretch the bucket over the erosion and sediment control to be able to dig that trench. I mean, that happens all the time.
Right, maybe I'm used to different means and methods, but I guess I'd be more familiar with the contractor being in line with the trench and the excavator, if they have the ability to do that.
I mean, again, for something like this, I would highly doubt they're gonna use a full-size excavator. But, I mean, it's possible that they're gonna have an arm long enough to where they can be on the down gradient side, stretching the bucket out parallel to the direction of the trench, and then adding soil erosion and sediment control as they go.
You said that's a 6-inch line?
Again, I'd have to look, that's what I thought it could be a 4. Traditionally, these system, or these buildings don't generate a ton of wastewater, so.
At a depth of,
This is 5 feet.
where, just, I'm just,
On
on one of the sheets, okay.
So there'd be watering control.
That's 3, sheet 3, CFG 3. Number 4 or 5 could be.
So deep sewer trench. You said the bottom of your basin was at, do you, based on the depth of the trench and what you know of seasonal high groundwater, do you anticipate encountering groundwater during construction and the need to dewater the trench?
I mean, my guess is the groundwater elevation is gonna be consistent throughout, and the trench itself is probably gonna be 4 to 5 feet. Do I think they're gonna hit groundwater? Probably not, but could they? Certainly.
Potentially.
Another ordinance question, actually. In terms of inspections, I think the ordinance puts some things on the city engineer, but would the city engineer be involved in this project because it doesn't discharge to a city drainage system?
That's a good question.
Using Paul Street Extension as an example?
Well, in that case, the city was gonna own the drainage
That's true.
system after the fact.
That's right. So what role would the city engineer play?
Right.
Who would be inspecting periodically?
I mean, I think because the city engineer is a week, he's been here a week, so I can't give you a sense of what he plans to do or not do.
Let's find out.
So I think if the commission has specific questions for the city engineer regarding this project and the stormwater side of it and the stormwater ordinance, which I'm sure he has not memorized yet,
Yeah.
then, you know, if you wanna put it all in an email to me, and I will forward to him, and then we can get that line of communication open, and if you need him to attend the next meeting, if his schedule allows, he can be here to answer questions directly.
Will you do that?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions, comments from the board? I will now open it up to comments from the public through the board, reminding folks that our jurisdiction there is the Wetlands Protection Act and the city, in this case, the city stormwater ordinance.
Nothing?
Believe it or not, I have no comment.
Yeah.
Alright, so, I would like to, leave the hearing open to discuss draft conditions at our next meeting. What are that?
Sounds good.
Sure.
That's the condition of the commission. I'm fine with it.
There's a lot of moving pieces here. Okay, so,
Do we have another meeting in December or
No.
not? January?
no, because I screwed up that session.
It's all your fault.
Hey, I have to, no, I don't have to work that day. Sorry. The next meeting would be December 26th. City offices will not be open that day, therefore, it
We're
will
at
be.
the 9th.
Huh?
We're at the 9th of January.
Is that what I said? There's a paper here somewhere.
I'm not going by your sheet there.
Ah, here it is, January 9th. So, motion to continue to January 9th at 6 p.m.
I will continue on January 9th at 6 p.m.
Second. All together? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What's that?
This is not a formal office yet, we'll need to meet others will be.
I'm not really sure exactly what all of this
We'll bring the book next time, okay? Just a little.
You're supposed to introduce a motion and then open it up for debate and discussion and all that sort of stuff. And then-
Okay. Moving on. One moment while we collect ourselves here. These are the minutes. That's not gonna help anybody. That is yours, right?
That's what your head looks like.
I'm gonna do this. Put this in the middle. So if no one minds going out of order, since
That's fine.
these
Falling asleep.
Right, no objections here.
Since these
Patient,
gentlemen
we're patient.
have been so patient.
Excuse me, is there anything new on the enforcement orders? That's
No.
nothing new on the enforcement, that's, so, I don't know.
Anyone in particular?
No, I was just
No,
curious.
there's nothing new regarding Mr. Gall, and the letter went to Mr. Boyle regarding, the auto properties, trail.
Okay.
Any news from DEP on the enforcement orders?
Fantastic.
I noticed that on the,
You don't do enforcement.
on the agenda, the Caroline Street isn't on there, is there a reason for that?
Did you take it off? We decided to take that off of the last one. That brain digging window. Okay, so, Mark Reed had reached out asking to informally discuss, some upcoming work at Williston. If you would all just graciously.
Sure. So, for the record, Jeff Cannon from Williston is here. Bill Cannon, I'm Mark Reed from Heritage Surveys, is here. Would like to talk to you about a new project that Williston is undertaking at their main campus. And Bill's got a plan. I made copies of what is proposed.
So you also, the mini version probably this one, we thought we'd just bring over bring a larger plan over so that everybody can kind of see it on the table.
I had one for Jessica.
I think that.
No, it's okay.
Just kidding.
Yeah, here. Yeah, Jeff.
Thanks.
What do I need to do?
So, this project in itself is 99 point.
Can you orient us a little bit
Sure.
here?
Okay, so
Park Street,
Park Street's here,
library,
library, the Reed Center,
pond,
and the pond is here,
and the bridges.
and the bridge is right here.
Okay,
Right
much
there,
better,
okay?
thank you. The bridge being the new bridge.
The existing bridge,
Oh, there's an existing bridge.
there's an existing bridge.
Yes, right.
Connects the campus
I'm with you.
to the
Not
athletic
the trails,
facilities.
right.
Athletic facilities.
Yeah.
Different
For
project.
that.
So, just one other thing,
Okay.
as you're looking at this main quadrangle, there's the loop road that enters in at this point right in here, goes into the site, and then kind of comes around a horseshoe and comes by the admission center.
Is that changing?
That's existing,
Yes.
so that's an existing
Oh,
loop
my.
road. Yeah, so I'll let Mark.
Yeah, right. So
And
that's
there's
what it-
nothing in there. And I was gonna say,
Right.
that's new.
Yeah, this whole, this is all open space,
Where's the line?
between all the lion statue is down here.
Right there,
Got it?
Down here,
Okay.
by, this is the existing flagpole down here, right?
right.
This,
Okay.
this is dining commons, on the lower level,
Is this where the bell
stairs.
is?
The bell's right here.
Victory Bell is right here.
Oh,
Right there.
okay, close.
Yeah,
I've
that's
got
the
it.
bell's right there.
It's right there, yeah.
With that.
Oh.
So that, yes, currently, there is the paved loop road
Mark, it's right here.
that comes straight through here and wraps around.
He gets a pass on that. It's kind
Yeah,
of
right,
nice to
yeah,
see.
right there, right there. So Payson Avenue
Okay,
is where you're sitting, Melissa,
yep.
for reference for that.
That's right.
So that Williston is proposing to build a new 13,800 square foot science building, which is shown on the plan, which is between the Reed Center and the administration building,
Oh,
just off of Park Street. What is being proposed, and we've been working with the city, with Jessica on the project in itself, and with the fire department and public safety, is it will eliminate this existing paved loop road through here. At the request of the fire department, for obvious reasons, they wanted to maintain access around, just in case there is a fire need. So we have some pavers, porous pavers being proposed that would adjoin a circular sidewalk for productivity. So basically, it removes all the vehicles from the campus, with the exception of this small parking field here, which would just come in and services the administration facility. So there won't be any more vehicle traffic within the main campus for that. Another aspect of the project, which again, here's the pond, 100-foot buffer zone.
So everything's outside that 100 foot.
So all this work is completely outside the 100-foot buffer zone. There's no work for, like I said, 99% of the project within the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. With the exception of twofold. We have a new, what is proposed is a drop-off loop road for students, which is still gonna be outside the 100-foot buffer zone, so the day students would, instead of stopping on Park Street and letting kids off, they would come into a loop road, drop off their children, and exit back out to Park Street. The biggest component of the project in itself is that we're tripping the stormwater management policy within the town bylaw, and also disturbing over an acre of land with the project in itself. So there's approximately 13,740 square feet of impervious surfaces that will get generated, about a 10% increase in impervious areas for the entire project, which is that second page of the handout I gave you, with kind of an outline of what it is being proposed here. So that we do have some impervious surfaces will be removed, like I mentioned, the loop roadway gets removed. Some will be increased, so that we're utilizing that paved surface for fire access around, which is again outside the buffer zone. And we did preliminary drainage calculations to look at stormwater for discharge from the site. As you know, this whole area discharges down to the pond through an existing outlet pipe, which is just in this area here before the bridge. So there's a series of catch basins and so forth going around. So that we don't have any new discharge points, we're utilizing existing discharge points, and being that we're in complying with the town's stormwater regulations, improving the stormwater discharge before it gets out to Rubber Thread Pond in a couple different ways. We will have some new catch basins with deep sumps and hoods within them, and we're proposing to do a new water quality structure, which will be located in the 100-foot buffer zone, but outside the 50. So that currently, stormwater comes down. There's a catch basin located in the corner of this existing paved area. There's 3 parking spaces. This is the security office in the back of the Reed Center at the lower level. So this is an existing paved area. The only work being proposed in the 100-foot buffer zone would be a new connection of a drain pipe that handles the runoff from the drop-off loop road into the catch basin, and then the installation of the new water quality treatment unit, which will be just right in the lawn area outside the 50-foot buffer zone for it. So, as I said, the 99% of the work is outside the buffer zone. The only work would be the installation of a new storm scepter, because it's at the lowest point. If we put the storm scepter outside the 100-foot buffer zone, it doesn't do any good, because you have stormwater conveyance and won't be treated
Right.
to meet the standards. So we have to put it down here at the lowest
And
point.
that's all maintained lawn area.
And that's a lawn area now. Yeah, it's all within lawn area with that. The connection, the physical connection from the catch basin across the paved area is currently paved. It's going to be excavated, trenched, backfilled, and repaved within the buffer zone through here. And by virtue of the improvements, we're improving the stormwater discharge that currently is discharging to the pond. The roof runoff from the new building itself, from the 13,800, will be infiltrated into a series of leaching catch basins. So all of the stormwater from the roof will be recharged into the ground around the building. So we have a series of leaching structures so that all the clean water from the roof will get recharged into the soils. We have about 5 to 6 feet of good sand material before we hit clay, which is typical through the whole site. So we got about 5 or 6 feet of good sand and gravel overlying clay, which is most of downtown East Hampton.
Only 75 feet.
Yeah, right, it's
Only
75 feet.
75 feet away? Oh.
Yeah. Another component, which, just for your information, like Wilson has done in the past, they're gonna be doing a series of wells for geothermal
Oh.
heating and cooling for the new building, which of course is still outside the buffer zone. But that's another component to the project. We've been, Bill, and been working with Jessica and so forth of going through the processes that we would have to do. The building in itself is exempt because it's an educational facility. So it won't be going through the planning board for site plan review.
So administratively, the stormwater would fall
To
to the
you.
commission?
Yes,
Okay.
so that's why we wanted to come in and meet with you, because yes, administratively, it falls to you.
Well, it falls to the city engineer unless there's a permit in front of Conservation Commission.
Right. But a request for determination of applicability, if that's what it would file, is not technically a permit.
Well, if,
It's like in the first paragraph, Dan can read it. But, you know, where it
No, I'm,
falls, so.
seriously,
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't want to,
when a project does not require review or permitting from the planning board or
Review or
requires.
permitting.
Hmm?
It says review or permitting.
Yeah, when a
For
project
planning
does not require review or permitting from the planning board, or requires review or a permit by the Conservation
Okay.
Commission, in addition to
Never mind.
review or permitting from the planning board, the Conservation Commission shall administer and implement this ordinance.
It's not at all confusing. Okay.
Right, so that's why, when we read the same thing, we came up with the same analysis.
yeah. Yeah,
That
okay.
unfortunately, you are the
No,
reviewing.
that's fine, I just wouldn't want
entity.
to, I wouldn't want to cross administrative.
Right, right.
To be a
Purposes.
person on Wetlands Protection Act,
Otherwise, we had
We've
no other
done
place
standalone
to,
before.
yeah.
No, that's,
get
We
plans.
talked about it ourselves and kind of agreed, but we didn't think that would fly.
Yeah.
Mark, did you want to tell about the existing systems in this area here where we're rejuxtaposing some catch basins?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's more detailed plans that we're working on to upgrade the existing catch basins within the site itself, which will be all part of the plan that we submit to the commission. So there's a lot of structures on site that don't meet the requirements of a 4-foot deep sumps, which will be upgraded as part of this project. And also trying to utilize some topographical features on the property to create some lower depressions and some areas that could act as a resource recharge area on the site, which is, again, outside the buffer zone. But
And this
so,
is-
so the only real work would be these two components relative to the RDA
So
filing.
you'd be less than 5,000 square feet
Oh, yes.
and more than 50 feet from the back?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna be over 50 feet, and well under 5,000 square feet. Comes out to be 780 square feet by the time you put the storm scepter in and a trench
Mhm.
within the buffer zone. So under 1,000 square feet.
So I think that falls within the range that we can review under an RDA.
What's your timing?
They're going through the next phase of it. It's probably gonna be a springtime.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
filing,
they're, we just finished design development drawings, and they're being priced, well, the drawings are supposed to be issued today. They'll be priced and it'll go to the trustees in January, for a final decision to go ahead at this point or not.
Yeah, one of the options is whether the loop road would be a component of it or not, depending on costs and so forth, so. So Bill's met with public safety, DPW, Joe Pep, and the new town engineer is
Dan Murphy.
Dan Murphy. Okay, he's from South Hadley. He worked for-
He was in East Long Meadow.
He might have
Yeah, he
been in
was.
South
Yeah,
Hadley.
Yeah, he was. Okay, Dan Murphy, no, I know him.
He's doing a lot of people.
Yes.
A long-term commitment.
So, seems to be anyway.
Yeah. So we just wanted the opportunity to come in and speak to the commission about the application that is forthcoming. Whether the commission would require a peer review or if it would be handled amongst the commission would be a question.
Well, we do have a city engineer
Now.
now.
Right, you didn't
Um,
have in the past. So.
We suffered a short gap.
Right.
So I guess I would wanna talk to him and find out what where his strengths lie, and
Yeah.
if he is confident in his abilities to provide that review, then
Mhm.
I would be more inclined to rely on those services than put it out to peer review.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think, I only feel the need to go to peer review if something's really, challenging and tight and everything like that, so, yeah, we'll see what this looks like, but it doesn't seem overly complicated or anything.
Right. Okay.
And Jeff, does the facilities handle the stormwater O&M?
Yes.
With all the infrastructure and?
Yeah.
So we heard what comments that Mark made earlier.
Had any new stormwater infrastructure?
Yes. Yeah. In terms of the geothermal wells, I know DEP, is that just a filing with them or
It's
is it
a
a permit?
registration.
And are you just
Anything
registered?
underground,
Yeah.
they wanna know, just so they know where they are.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
all.
Is this a zone 2 here? Is there something about,
I think this whole part of, like,
is there something about
everything, like-
geothermal wells in a zone 2?
No, it's geothermal wells anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was something about them.
Yeah, but, and these are closed wells, I mean, we wouldn't be able to do an open well in East Hampton, especially on that site. But we did go through, we did a dormitory.
The dorms on Main Street
Yeah,
and Payson Avenue.
Directly across the street.
yeah. Yeah, so we went through that process before.
How deep do you have to go, just out of curiosity, to fuel a building of that size?
Center of the earth.
Very, very deep.
Yeah, we're.
300-400 or deeper?
We went 350 on the last ones. We're debating, we're looking at doing 2 test wells and debating whether we'll go to 500 feet on these rather than the 350. It would allow us to have a few less wells, but then your piping has to change with the extra depth. That just it's 250 psi instead of 200 psi pipe.
How big is a well like that? Like, what's the diameter?
It's 6 inches.
That's it.
The pipe
Yeah,
goes
in
around.
fact, they can do them down to 4.5 inches. And you drive casing until you hit something solid, and then you pull the casing out as you grout it. So there's no casing or anything, just thermal grout, bentonite grout that goes around an 1.5 U-tube. That's all. They come on site, all from the manufacturer, so the user all certified and everything. You drill it and drop it in and grout it and hook them up.
Wow.
Every water well go that deep all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least water wells are constructed.
How many do you expect you'll need?
Well, we're debating still, it's a cost thing, whether we do a full basement in the building. And at 350 feet, they were thinking close to 60 wells, a 20-foot square grid.
And that changed this afternoon with a request from the architects. I think we reduced it to 40 now.
Yeah.
Approximately 20 feet on center. It's just a grid
Yeah.
that kind of fills up
Yeah.
basically this
If we go-
whole area right in here.
Yeah, we've
Deeper,
done some stuff inside the building in terms of airflows, and they're using a double-wheel desiccant unit for fresh air that's dropped the load somewhat. So, yeah, we've been certainly the wells are expensive, but the energy savings that we've seen on the other system that we put in are pretty amazing. And also right now with the gas moratorium, hookup in East Hampton, we don't want to put a 10,000-gallon oil tank in the ground after we just got rid of all the oil on the whole campus.
Beat the deadline.
Right.
Yeah, so that's really pushing. The geothermal is a significant cost upgrade to the building, but they're just a neat system that I'm pushing for, but I'm not the one paying for it either, so.
All right.
So, can just so the Conservation Commission is clear, from the site plan that you see in front of you right now, this was intentional from the very beginning to create this open space that is kind of framed by academic buildings and institutional buildings, so that there's a whole new kind of a design for this quadrangle area, rather than it just being kind of an entrance driveway that comes in and comes around and everything else as kind of a ceremonial type of entrance. Now this is becoming kind of a personalized open space that's going to give some further identity to the school, and it can be used by all the dormitories that surround the quadrangle, as well as we're still keeping the open space for the graduation events and everything else that were oriented towards Reed Center, are now going to be, we're thinking about reorienting it to the new building, to the new science building. But the science building location was done purposefully so that we can kind of create this new quadrangle landscape campus area for the school. And as a result, as Mark had explained it, we went through talking to the fire department about making sure that they were happy with some kind of emergency access to the quadrangle without having it paved with new driveways and everything else. So we came up with a system of the reinforced turf with a design of a 8-foot wide promenade walkway that would kind of hook up to some of the other sidewalks on the site as well.
And for the record, this was not named after me.
Just a happy
I was wondering.
Yeah.
You've been.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Now I
So,
gotta get all the work.
no relation to the Reeds that
Yeah.
it was named for.
Yeah. Yeah, down in the Westfield area is.
Oh, really?
Right.
Yeah. Mastech.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
And I'm no relation to those Mestec people, so I'm
Yeah.
out of my portion.
I don't think you want anything to do with that site.
So anyways,
All right.
all right, so,
Great, thank you for the
Yep.
heads up, and we look forward
and
to.
we'll work and maybe we'll have a conversation, now that Dan's on board. We can, have a dialogue with Dan Murphy and that's great that the city has a new engineer, so that's helpful.
Yes, yes,
Well,
it is.
For everybody, I'm sure.
For everyone concerned, yeah. All right, thank you.
We can do it, yes, thank you.
Well, you have
We-
smaller versions
We
of
do
this,
have
right?
max scales,
Yeah,
yeah, or reduced scale.
Yeah. So the application won't be submitted in February, or January, probably in March. Most likely, by the time the trustees get done deciding, whether they're gonna move forward with this very costly venture. Right, Jim?
The schedule will be posted.
Yes.
There are no major changes. so
Yep,
Yep.
all right, thank
see
you.
when you
See you
get
guys.
ready.
Yep.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Okay. So, going back up, there's no new news on enforcement actions.
Great.
You have snow day.
I'm so
Nope,
done with
I
it.
guess the only comment I'll make, David Boyle requested that we work with him on the enforcement order under
Great.
D.
Yep.
So we will be working with him on
Okay,
applying with
great.
that
You mentioned a
enforcement
few
order.
things that would delay his
Yes, he-
additional input until January. We
Correct.
received that message, so.
Correct. So that's, but he's requested that
Okay,
we get involved with that, and we are going to do that on his behalf.
great.
Okay. Any compliance thoughts, or?
I don't think so.
We'll think of something just as soon as you walk out the
How
door.
about that?
Yeah,
No.
yeah,
Yeah.
always the fact, so.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks,
Have a nice,
George.
Merry Christmas to all, and
You
yeah,
too.
Happy New Year, and see you next year.
See you next year.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, wait. Okay, so are there any, updates regarding the orchard?
So she sent the pricing, so I was just gonna take that and start putting a CPA application together,
Okay,
right?
great.
I still have to get a pruning quote. She still knew the name of their pruner who was out at the orchard, but they didn't know his number. And he was like, come on over and ask him, and I couldn't do that, so, still working on tracking down, unless
Okay,
anybody
so I'll wait
knows.
until you get all the final numbers together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rodney Dupree in Southern Vermont, that's the only information you can give me.
And
Anyone
so,
know?
Mark, part of conservation property that the city acquired on Park Hill, where all the orchards are, is a long neglected portion of orchard that has mostly diseased, dead, dying trees, or apple trees. And so we're trying to maintain momentum in addressing it with some of those open space funds that were part of that project. And
Very nice.
yeah, and there will be an RDA or similar for some of the work in buffer zone, but we're hoping to use CPA money for part of it too.
Good.
Yeah.
You're looking for Rodney?
Yeah, just looking
I'm
to
just
see if
jotting
something
down
pops
what
up.
Jessica
Yeah, I
said,
couldn't
because I
find
can
it.
never remember stuff about the orchard.
Ask me interested, no, that's not
What?
Let's just look up the guy's name, just.
Got my attention.
I may call another.
So what are the invasive species of concern in there, actually?
Probably multiflora rose.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
What else is there? I think there's some
Is that
Japanese
rose?
knotweed honey. actually.
Really?
I didn't see that, I
Maybe
don't
I
remember
remember
seeing
now.
that weed.
Maybe Barbara?
Oh,
It could be Barbary,
and And bittersweet?
Probably bittersweet.
What invasive species are not on the big?
Japanese.
Probably
bamboo.
Japanese
Is that
nut.
right?
Japanese bamboo.
William Cuspidata, false bamboo. You see, like if you drive along and if you look or paddle along a river and you look up, it's like the entire,
The whole floodplain.
yeah, it, like the stem looks like, it grows very tall. It looks like bamboo,
But it's not as strong.
but it's not as strong. It's very slippery when you try to step on it, it's wet.
Step on it.
And it's wet, like if it rains and you go to like step on it to break it, to
Does
make
it
your path.
Looks similar to knotweed in stem structure, but then just has skinny leaves.
No, it actually is broadleaves.
It's broadleaves.
How tall does it get?
Taller than me.
I'm looking it up.
Go ahead, look it up. So, Mark, what were you gonna say?
I was asking you about the Cumberland Farms in Westfield, I know the one.
Yeah.
You're saying they're not maintaining the basin?
I'm saying there's a swale parallel to 202 that, for at least 2 growing seasons has supported knotweed.
Oh, well, we'll take care of that.
I don't know if it's there this year or not, I haven't noticed it, but I noticed it, and I know, Karen Lay identified that as an issue on site.
That
All
looks
right,
like
we'll
a
talk about it.
So I guess I'm asking about that just because of, do we wanna include that in the CPA application?
That's a whole nother.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, you leaving? You want our 2017 schedule?
Sure. No, it's on your website. That's
It
one
will
thing
be.
I like about your website is you keep it up to date for you.
Oh, thank you. We tried.
It'll be, the 2017 schedule will be posted. Right now, all that's up there is I completely missed the fact that Monday, the 26th would be a holiday.
Oh, the Birdie Cove stuff, how's that? Enforcement stuff, is he complying?
He's complying with 37 South Street. These two here, Dave and Dave, Fallis and Cameron came out to check and take the lead on.
Okay.
And that's why, and that there
Yeah.
have been no updates.
That started a year ago, New Year's Eve.
That's right.
Yeah.
Did you talk to Dave or Dave?
Not recently.
No, shoot him an email. I mean, right now, we have Eversource and Tennessee Gas and a couple other things taking up a lot of time.
Okay.
So just shoot him an email, say, what's up?
No, it's not.
Oh, this was
All right.
not.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thanks, Norm. Good to see you.
It's not weed. Does it look like this?
Oh, yeah, Japanese knotweed, false bamboo, William Cuspidata.
I've never heard it called Japanese bamboo before.
Yeah.
Oh, you threw us all off with that.
Oh,
Oh,
It does look sort of like
did I,
a.
the stem looks
The
bamboo-ish.
Yeah, it does.
no, it doesn't.
Yeah, I've just never actually heard it called that.
Goes that way, it doesn't
it
go like
doesn't.
straight up.
No, it goes pretty
It goes
straight
straight
up.
up, I don't know what you're
Japanese,
talking
6 to
about.
what do you,
7
wait,
feet.
what is,
It's Japanese knotweed,
Japanese knotweed?
false bamboo,
No.
William
Oh,
Cuspidata.
that's green.
Then what am I thinking? What am I
I
thinking
do-
about where every joint takes an
Okay.
angle? That's
Okay.
like
I'm gonna
15
go, or?
degrees.
No,
Short things.
Do you want it?
Still grass.
No.
okay,
But somebody stock. It's gotta look like that.
compliance.
Okay.
Motion to continue.
You keep thinking about that.
But wait, so,
Ignoring you.
no.
Wall
Well,
Street
can we go
Extension.
back to the, can we go back to the orchard?
Okay,
Okay, I think I would like to have an invasive species management component if we open up the canopy there.
okay,
All right.
yes.
Yes.
So now we need quotes for invasive species management. Who wants to call Paul, among other people?
We just need to, we don't need 3 quotes, we just need an estimate so that we can put a budget together to go to CPA.
So could
But
someone,
afterward, we're gonna have to
10
do the
grand.
RFP process, but we
That
need
goes
to-
up,
you
okay.
can't RFP unless you have the money in hand first, so.
We need to really know what we have though, right?
hmm?
I'll let any as well. We'll ask them.
On the document that I shared from the site visit we did with, Russell, I wrote down what the invasives were. I think it
They
was
cured
pretty-
leprosy, you know.
Yeah, they didn't cure this.
Okay, so we're gonna include an invasive species management component. Great. Paul Street Extension, despite the fact that there's a wrong date, not updated. Looks like they're still working on sufficient siding and trim. Does it look like they removed the trees that they were having trouble with? Or that they were?
I don't think you mentioned it, did you?
It's not called out specifically, and I'm trying to,
Should we chase them down in the parking lot?
no. Can someone else take a look? Okay.
Was it number 30 that they were doing this?
Yeah, the other one they closed out.
It looks like it's fun.
You just pulled the other reports.
This still looks like it's wrapped in bittersweet. Was that one of the ones that they were pulling?
There was the bigger one.
Oh, this
Jay,
one's
have
the
you
one that got.
Gone back out to,
Yeah, I think the bigger one.
Logan?
No, didn't have to do this.
I don't see us.
Oh, no,
There's
you're
nice.
not. You're going in
We were
order.
gonna
I'll
cut-
go in order.
Oh, no, they
We were gonna cut
low,
off
they
this
were gonna
and-
cut high. It doesn't look like
I don't think
or
it's
they
been
didn't follow
done,
the-
or it's not showing here.
Okay, so the question will be, the question for Paul Street is, have the trees been removed?
I'm gonna say no with these photos that,
If
that
you
looks
don't
like a
look
pine
like-
tree.
It looks like a bittersweet right there.
Yeah, that's not photo.
No, it's like in the bottom.
That looks like the pine tree that has the bittersweet in it. So I'm gonna say the photos were taken, it was still there, still there.
Okay, so I'm just making a note to reach out to Mark Reed and ask if the trees have been removed as discussed, and if not, to call it out specifically in the weekly inspection report when that work is completed. Okay,
Do you want me to write that down?
yep, you can, if you want.
Take these back.
No, those are gonna get filed, okay, so they can go in the mail. Pleasant Street Mills?
Waiting on as-bills.
Oh, that's good to know. How long have you been waiting on as-bills?
Several weeks. The rest of the packet is
They're
ready
the
to go.
least fun part.
Everything else is ready to go. It's all filled out, just waiting on as-bills.
Okay, great, thank you. 15 Cottage Street, Nashwanik Mills?
Don't see any activity.
No activity. Oxbow, okay, I actually heard anything back from Terry on that. 184 Northampton Street. Doesn't look like anything changed, excuse me. Did anyone notice?
No.
They don't have the weekly reporting.
He requested an extension, correct?
Mhm.
Right.
And that's scheduled for January?
That was granted.
Oh, it was granted.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Is
Yeah.
that it? So 1/13/2009?
Yes, 2019, he
Okay.
requested a 2-year extension.
Okay.
Oh, I can take this off, sorry.
The, Town Beach.
Yeah. Has it been recorded? Can't remember if that's come through.
I gave it to the Nashwanik Pond Committee to file, so.
Okay. Can you make a note of that in the minutes, that the original certificate of compliance was,
Do you want me to, so it's not on there anymore as compliance updates, because we closed it out, where do you want it?
general
General
business? Do you need the reference for it?
It's not, is
It
it on here?
it is still on there.
Okay. I'll do it.
Jess, do we need you for anything else here?
I don't know, do you?
If you wanna run away, always. You looked at the 2017 schedule and
Mm-hmm.
good with it? Okay. So
I'm
if
sure,
we
I'm
wanna-
sure I missed something though, so.
No.
I missed the last one.
Two.
I'd like to point out that you all missed my placeholder in the agenda. Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna run. Thank you.
Good.
Have a good
All
night.
right, thanks.
What was it that was filed with the national?
Original certificate of compliance was delivered to the Nashwanik Pond Steering Committee by the city planner to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. Proof of recording pending. watching. He is not watching.
Where do these actually go, the videos?
I think they get broadcast on cable access TV.
When?
Like, I don't know.
Like
in
at
the middle of the
midnight?
night. So one of our daycare teachers has said that he watches sometimes.
Really?
I think he's got very small babies.
Better to do in the middle of the
Yeah.
night.
I used to have very small babies and nothing but like 4 PBS stations that came in on the rabbit ears.
Yeah.
Watched.
If you're watching, John, how's it going?
Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. Lathrop, no updates. Probably won't be till next year. Williston, no updates on the cross-country running trails. East Hampton, Nashwanik Pond, they're done for the year. No veg management updates to be had.
Yeah. We got a communication from them saying that they were done for the year basically, and that we need anything from them, and I think the answer was not until they were gonna apply for the next time.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Loven, there are 2 updates, December 2nd and December 9th.
Starting to build a little roadway,
Yep.
driveway.
So as of December 2nd, they completed the installation of fiber log barriers. They continue cutting trees and, I'm gonna assume stacking, not staking logs and branches into piles. No stumps were removed or any other earthwork performed. Also- So there's some photos here. Jay, and when was the last time you were on site, Jay?
When I did the erosion protection inspection, pre-planning meeting, so probably 3 weeks ago at this point.
Okay. As of December 9th, erosion control barriers, no sign in place, no sign of erosion. Loven Construction started trucking in gravel material for the proposed driveway. Fill material was compacted in place, logs/brush removed in the topsoil removed from fill area and stockpiled on site.
What was compacted in place? I was
Gravel
confused
for
by
the
that.
driveway.
There's photos in there.
Yep.
New fill that they brought in?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
to
yeah,
build the
gotcha.
driveway down, from the road height.
The material that they were removing and stockpiling went where we discussed?
Or it was
last
gonna
time?
go to its final location, they were thinking they would
Oh,
not
that's
truck
right.
it, they were gonna move it right to where it needed to go, so.
So that's another question, where,
Where did it actually
It's,
land at?
and they may not have done it yet,
well, he said they did it.
okay, cause I don't see photos showing.
Is this visible from the road now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll finally figure out where on the street this is.
It's like very
I
close
looked
to
and
the
looked and
intersection.
haven't
Yeah,
figured out.
it's really not far from the intersection.
The intersection of,
Route 10.
really? Okay. Maybe I don't start looking until too late.
This is right after whatever that office building is across from me.
Okay, so that's it for updates.
That's dirt.
Okay, 2017, so excited.
Is this general business?
Yeah.
It's just good. It's gonna be in my car for the next 6 months, and I'm, wow, what is this here? I'm gonna throw it out.
I
So
see
it
that's
has
the built
to
up
dry,
right?
but-
Dry?
Yeah, that's what they,
Looks so happy.
That's what happens to paper.
Hard to see it. It's okay. It's not actually that against you. And what are they doing to stabilize it?
Just-
What?
How are they stabilizing the slope of the driveway there for
I
you?
don't think I realized it was quite that high.
Much, Phil?
It's gonna be retaining walls, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah.
Oh, rip wrap.
blocks.
No, I think it's
They're
red- like Ready
they're
Rock,
pretty
sort of
vertical.
interlocking.
Oh.
Basically alternative to a wide footprint.
It's such a tight area.
Where are we on this agenda right here?
We're good? At 11?
Yeah.
We're almost at the end. So, I went through and pulled together 2017 meeting dates based on second and fourth Mondays. And then the corresponding submittal deadlines and legal ad publication deadlines, which is basically how we post this to the city's website. And there weren't many exceptions for holidays. I'm trying to think of where they are. Does anyone have a calendar?
This one.
We actually, I think there was only 1 month where it landed funny for the actual meeting dates.
I think there were 2 spots that was maybe funny.
I feel like this is something that Ashley's good at.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that Ashley is good at. Call her.
Does anyone actually want to pull it out of my bag?
Okay.
Okay. So it's October. October, it's the 3rd and 5th Mondays. Because the 2nd is a holiday. So since there were and then I felt like that left us, so October, the second Monday in October is the 9th, and that's Columbus Day. So I switched it to the 16th and the 30th, and then because of the way the weeks fall, the days fall, we still have a decent gap. There's a week between the last October meeting and the first November meeting. And then, again, because the second Monday in December is Christmas Day, I didn't adjust the schedule for 2 meetings in December. So I just left it as December 11th, and there we are.
You think you did a beautiful job.
Huh?
It'd be quite a meeting.
This wasn't that quiet.
No, on
The 25th.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, you know, we'd be outside. So if everyone's okay with it, or if anyone wants to
Let's do it.
ponder, otherwise I'll send it to Jess and have it posted to the city's website.
Looks good.
Okay, does anyone wanna read through the meeting minutes? I made a few tweaks, more like elaboration or clarification or. How's that going there? Does that make it easier to read?
Yes. Anyone?
I've seen it before.
This also looks like you did a fantastic job.
File, because I brought a stack.
Yeah.
8 o'clock.
I do not care, the stack is not going back with me.
If you just leave it here,
If everyone.
the filing fairies will come deal with it, right? Oh,
Yeah, that's called recycling. I'm afraid of what would happen if it just. didn't.
Anyone?
Anyone else?
What is
Like
that?
Flapping of wings.
That sound like that. Like
It's
a
the little
mouse
things.
up in the ceiling that, you know.
Yeah.
It's
Weird
weird
pictures
having
on the
a
wall.
thing, like a sliding like a panel door. It's hilarious.
I move to approve the November 28th meeting minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Move to adjourn.
Richard. Second.
Is there a second? Oh, we don't have any mail. Oh, that's right, it was locked. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. 8:02.
Do.